I always thought I had mastered the art of control. My name is Elise. I'm 43 years old, the founder and CEO of a successful AI company that systematizes enterprise operations. On paper, I'm accomplished. In photos, I'm polished. In boardrooms, I'm fierce. At home, I'm something else entirely. A performance. A well-scripted version of the perfect mother, the supportive wife, the woman who has it all figured out. But every role has its curtain call, and lately, mine feels overdue. I live in a spacious, sunlit house outside the city. My husband, Victor, is a theater director, artistic, eloquent, deeply in love with the stories he stages, but less fluent when it comes to mine. We've been married for almost 2 decades. He's a good man, gentle, but he's not what I need. I asked him once, tentatively, hopefully, if he could explore the more complex parts of me, the darker things I didn't even know how to name. He blinked slowly, then softly said, "I don't think I'm built that way." And that was that. He's not cruel, not distant. Just afraid of the same fire that I'm drawn to. Then there's Mia, our daughter. She's 15 and brilliant, all sharp edges and curiosity. I see so much of myself in her. It's both comforting and terrifying. And then there's Isaac, my son, my adopted son. Isaac turned 18 3 months ago. He moved into our home when he was 9, after years bouncing between foster homes. He was wary of affection then, like it might turn into smoke if he got too close. And now he's turned into someone even more startling. A man. Tall, confident, attentive in ways that catch me off guard. He sees people, really sees them. And more, I get the uneasy sense that he sees me too, past the practiced grace and easy smiles. Sometimes, I think he knows things I haven't even admitted to myself. There are moments when I'm sitting in the kitchen, sipping tea after another long strategy session with a board of investors, and he'll walk in. Shirt clinging from a post-run sweat, dark eyes meeting mine for just a beat too long. It's nothing. Of course it's nothing. He'll reach for water, and I'll bury my gaze in the steam rising from my cup, pretending not to notice how I suddenly can't breathe right. I tell myself it's maternal pride, that I'm simply marveling at the person he's become. But there's a thread inside me, fine, trembling, that tells me it's something more. At night, I lie beside Victor and count the seconds between his breath and his sleep. It never takes long. He's always tired. Directing takes so much out of him. When I'm certain he's gone, I slip from the bed, pad barefoot into the small den at the end of the hallway. My escape. A velvet chaise, low lamplight, and the drawer in the side table that holds the sleek black device I never speak of. Sometimes my phone is enough. Headphones in, eyes shut. Listening to someone else's voice lead me into a story that isn't mine but feels dangerously close. Other nights, I need more. My toy hums to life, and I close my eyes, pretending I'm someone else. Someone being seen, heard, needed, desired. Victor wouldn't understand. I tried telling him once, softly, in bed one night, when I was feeling braver than usual. "Do you ever want to try something different?" I had whispered. He kissed my forehead and said, "You're perfect just like this." As if that were the answer. But I didn't want to be perfect. I wanted to be known. And now, Isaac, his presence in the house is changing something. He lingers more. Not in an inappropriate way, but in a way that feels attentive. He listens when I speak. Not out of politeness, but with an intensity that unnerves me. At dinner, his gaze holds mine longer than necessary when Victor is mid-sentence. He asks questions that dip beneath the surface. "Are you happy, really? Do you feel understood?" The other night, as I stood by the stove stirring a sauce I'd made 1,000 times, he came up behind me and said, "You always cook like you're trying to distract yourself from something." His voice was low, not teasing. Observant. I laughed it off, but something in my hands shook. I had to put the spoon down. Then today, something shifted. It was just past noon. I was home from work early. Victor had taken Mia to a matinee production downtown. I walked into the kitchen expecting quiet and found Isaac leaning against the counter, scrolling through something on his phone. He looked up, and his expression flickered into something unreadable. "You're home early," he said. "Strategy meeting canceled," I replied, moving toward the fridge. "Everyone's got some new AI startup now. We're drowning in pitches." He nodded, then added, "You look tired." I glanced at him. His tone wasn't casual. It was weighted with something else. Something deeper. I said honestly, reaching for a bottle of mineral water. "Some days it feels like I'm living someone else's life." Silence stretched between us. Then, gently, he said, "Maybe it's time to start living your own." I froze. The bottle slipped slightly in my grasp, and I turned to look at him. He was still watching me, not with judgment, but with an understanding that felt too intimate. I swallowed. "That's easier said than done."
"Not always," he said.
Then his phone buzzed, and the moment shattered. But I haven't stopped thinking about it since. I hadn't expected Isaac to take an interest in my work. He'd always been quietly gifted with technology, his mind naturally attuned to patterns, algorithms, and the unspoken language of code. But until recently, he'd kept his talents largely to himself, buried in projects I only glimpsed when I passed by his room late at night and saw his monitor glowing in the dark. Then, one evening over dinner, between bites of grilled salmon and green beans, he surprised me. "I was thinking," he said, setting his fork down, "maybe I could help you out at the company." I blinked. "You want to work with me?" He shrugged, a casual gesture that didn't hide the hint of anticipation in his eyes. "I like what you're doing. All the AI infrastructure for business systems. It's smart. I think I could learn a lot, and maybe even contribute." My heart fluttered at the idea, not just because he was interested, but because it meant more time with him. And I suppose because I wanted to see him in my world. "Of course," I said, smiling. "We always have room for new interns, especially ones who already speak machine learning like a second language." That following Monday, he arrived at the office in a fitted white shirt tucked neatly into charcoal slacks. The leather of his belt gleamed faintly in the sunlight pouring through the glass-paneled foyer. His jawline looked sharper in the light, his hair just a touch tousled. He looked older, more certain, the kind of man who turned heads. And turn heads he did. My secretary, Dana, nearly dropped her coffee when she first saw him walk in. She recovered quickly, but not before glancing over at me with a sly little smile, the kind that said, "Well, you didn't mention this intern was going to look like a model." I rolled my eyes and laughed it off, but a strange twist pulled at my stomach. Jealousy. It came quick and unfamiliar, coiled tight in my chest like a secret I didn't want to admit even to myself. Isaac was a natural fit at the company. He absorbed everything like a sponge: client data flows, predictive analytics, optimization logic. Within a week, he was making quiet suggestions that our lead developers started implementing. He had a knack for it. But it wasn't just his aptitude that unsettled me. It was the way he treated me there, at work, in my domain. He never called me Mom at the office, and though that made sense, it still struck a chord each time he said Elise, with a confidence that almost sounded like he owned the right. During breaks, he'd drift into my office carrying 2 mugs of coffee, always with just the right splash of almond milk and a single sugar cube in mine. We'd sip in comfortable silence, occasionally sharing a laugh over something one of the junior analysts had bungled or some new AI model that refused to cooperate. The line between mentor and peer blurred, and somehow I didn't mind. One afternoon, I passed him in the hallway. He was standing by the window with Caroline from accounting, a young woman whose lipstick always matched her manicures. They were chatting about something. She was laughing too easily, tossing her hair. And then, mid-sentence, Isaac looked up. His eyes met mine across the corridor.
And he didn't look away.
Not right away. His gaze was steady, deliberate. Like I was the one thing in the room that mattered. I felt a shiver roll through me, faint, but undeniable. I smiled reflexively, as if to mask it, and kept walking. But I felt it for hours after. The mark of his gaze, like warm pressure behind my ribs. Later that day, he stopped by my office as usual, set down the coffee, and lingered longer than normal. You're doing something new with the neural interface, he said, glancing at the open code on my screen. Trying to, I replied. It's not adapting as fluidly as I want it to across different data structures. He studied it for a moment, then said, You ever think maybe it's not the model that's the problem? Maybe it's the data. It's not giving you the whole picture. I looked at him, struck by how right he was, and how quietly certain. You're right, I said. Again. He smiled faintly, then leaned a bit closer, lowering his voice. You don't give yourself enough credit, you know. Something in his tone made me pause. Made my skin warm. You think so? I asked, softly. I know so, he said. And for just a second too long, the silence between us stretched, warm and charged. Then the phone on my desk rang, breaking the spell. He stepped back. Guess I'll let you get that, he said, giving me a quick, almost mischievous smile before slipping out the door. I watched the space he'd just occupied and suddenly couldn't remember who was on the other end of the line. That night, Victor reached for me like he always did, gentle, considerate, following the same rhythm he always had, one he believed I enjoyed. He whispered soft words and kissed my shoulder, thinking he was giving me what I wanted. But all I could think of was Isaac. I felt the shame bloom inside me like something invasive, rooted in a place I hadn't known was fertile. Victor moved against me, but in my mind, I saw Isaac's eyes. The way they lingered when he handed me coffee, how they followed me across the room. The way he spoke to me like I was fascinating, not just familiar. And somewhere in the haze of that shameful fantasy, I justified it. He's not mine. Not by blood. Not by birth. And that small, cruel distinction gave my mind permission to wander. I imagined him touching me with a hunger Victor never had. I imagined his lips brushing the curve of my neck, his hands pinning me to the reality I'd long tried to silence. I kept my eyes closed, hiding the truth behind my lashes, riding the waves of a moment that wasn't real. When it was over, Victor kissed my temple and drifted to sleep with the ease of a man who never questioned if he was enough. But I lay there, wide-eyed, my body still aching, not from what he gave me, but from the ghost of what he hadn't. The next morning at work, I couldn't look at Isaac. I busied myself with meetings and reports, staring at spreadsheets like they held the key to forgetting. But he was everywhere, his laughter echoing down the hall, the scent of his cologne lingering near the shared coffee station, the sound of his voice as he spoke to our team in that low, assured tone. I kept my distance, barely meeting his gaze in meetings, pretending to be engrossed in my screen when he passed by. But he noticed. I could feel it in the way he hesitated outside my office, the way his smile dimmed slightly when our eyes did meet. And still, he didn't press. He was just there. Constant. Quietly attentive. That afternoon, I stepped into the work storeroom to retrieve an old device I needed for a systems demo. The space was cramped, narrow aisles of shelving and plastic bins stacked with labeled equipment. I was scanning the shelves when I heard the door open behind me. I thought you might need help, Isaac said, his voice gentle but unignorable. He stepped inside, the door clicking shut softly behind him. I swallowed. I'm just grabbing something. It's fine. He moved closer anyway, peering over my shoulder. You're looking for the 2.3 module? I nodded, and he reached above me with ease, retrieving the box I'd been struggling to spot. His hand brushed mine as he passed it to me, warm, steady, unhurried. But it wasn't the touch that made me tense. It was the proximity. We were alone. The storeroom was quiet, the hum of the overhead light loud in the stillness. I took a step back instinctively, but he was already too close. You've been avoiding me, he said, not accusing, just matter of fact. I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words refused to come. He looked at me, really looked, and something in me fractured. I'm not, I whispered, but I wasn't even sure what I was denying. His eyes searched mine. You don't have to pretend around me. He leaned in slowly, so slowly I had time to step away, to break the spell. But I didn't. I couldn't. The moment swelled between us, unbearably close. I felt the heat of him, the magnetic pull that had been tightening for days. And just when I thought he would kiss me, the sound of heels clicking down the hallway shattered the silence. Dana. I stiffened. Isaac pulled back a fraction, just enough to restore the illusion of space. The doorknob jiggled once, lightly, before the sound of footsteps continued past. I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. "We should go," I whispered, my voice tight. He nodded, his expression unreadable, and handed me the module like it was the only thing that had happened. But as I walked back to my office, my fingers trembling around the plastic box, I knew the truth. Something had shifted, and I had let it. The office was quiet, unnervingly so. Everyone had gone home hours ago. Even the cleaning crew had passed through, their whispers and vacuum hums long faded. Only my office still glowed, its glass walls a soft lantern in the darkened hive of our headquarters. I should have gone home. I had promised Victor I'd be back for dinner, but the mountain of work was too high and my mind too crowded. Isaac lived behind my eyes now. Every movement, every thought curled back to him, impossible to ignore. I was afraid of what I was becoming, of what I might already be. So I gave in just a little. From the hidden safe beneath my desk, I took out a bottle of Burgundy I'd kept for emergencies. I poured half a glass, kicked off my heels, and let my hair tumble down from the tight twist I always wore. I lit a cigarette from an old pack tucked in the drawer, the habit a ghost from a decade ago, revived only by fatigue and the yearning for something raw, something real. I leaned back in my leather chair, the smoke curling into the air like an offering to a god I no longer believed in. Barefoot, wine in hand, the taste of tobacco on my lips, I wasn't the polished CEO anymore. I was just Elise, a woman, tired, haunted, wanting. I exhaled slowly, feeling the relief in my bones. My silk blouse clung to me, loose now in the absence of my rigid posture. My mind wandered to him again. Isaac. The way he had looked at me in the storeroom, the nearness of his breath, the way he almost kissed me. What did he see when he looked at me? The door opened quietly. I froze, heart stuttering. Isaac. He stepped inside, slowly, confidently, his gaze sweeping across the room, pausing on my bare feet, the cigarette, the half-drunk wine. His eyes met mine. He didn't smile, didn't speak. But something passed between us like an electric current. He had never seen me like this before. But somehow I knew he had always known this part of me existed. He didn't look shocked. He looked home. Wordlessly, he crossed the room, reached for the ashtray, and plucked one of the remaining cigarettes from the pack. He lit it with a small silver lighter, took a slow drag, and settled on the sofa across from me. We said nothing. The silence was charged, humming. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, pale pink candy, round, glossy, almost innocent. He held it low, his arm draped over his knee, palm tilted slightly toward the floor. He looked at me, not with demand, but with quiet invitation. Something inside me trembled. I slid from the chair without thinking, my knees brushing the cold hardwood. I crawled toward him, each movement deliberate, fragile with meaning. When I reached him, I leaned in and took the candy from his palm with my lips. It dissolved sweetly on my tongue, and then he said it, softly, low enough that it vibrated in my chest. Good girl. The air between us grew thick, not with lust exactly, but with the surrender of pretense. I felt seen, not admired or desired, but seen.
Completely.
Without disguise. He stood then, walked toward the hallway, and for a moment, I thought he might leave. But he turned toward the small staff kitchen. I sat there on the floor, breath shallow, unsure what to expect. When he returned, he was holding a glass of milk. He knelt in front of me and lifted the glass to my lips, as if offering something sacred. I drank a little, the coolness washing down the sweetness of the candy. But then he tipped the glass further. Milk spilled slightly, a trickle sliding down my chin, soaking into the collar of my blouse. He didn't flinch. Just watched the drop as it traced over me, a painter admiring his stroke. Then, wordlessly, he leaned in and kissed me. His lips met mine with a softness that stole my breath. Not urgent, not demanding, just certain. It was the kind of kiss that unravels years. And when we pulled apart, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. The days that followed felt like drifting through a dream. One of those fragile, translucent dreams you try not to touch too much, afraid it will collapse into waking. At work, Isaac was as composed and intelligent as ever. He brought me my coffee in the mornings, reviewed data models in meetings, and engaged in technical debates with the team as if nothing had changed. But beneath the surface of every glance, every brief moment when we passed one another in a hallway, was that night. The cigarette, the candy, the milk,
The kiss.
I felt it in my skin, like an imprint, like a vow neither of us had spoken aloud. At home, I returned to Victor. I watched him from across the dinner table, his familiar smile as he told Mia about a new stage production, his hands gesturing with enthusiasm.
He was a good man.
He loved us. But I watched him the way one might observe a scene from a play, scripted, lit beautifully, but ultimately hollow. I laughed in the right places. I asked the right questions. I played the part. But inside, a woman I had tried to silence for years had finally opened her eyes. And she was wide awake. Isaac didn't push. He didn't invade or demand or corner me into impossible choices. He simply existed nearby like gravity. I could feel him even when I didn't see him. One evening, when the office had cleared out and the storm outside had turned the windows into sheets of water, I found myself again alone. Or so I thought. I was standing by the window in the break room, watching lightning stutter across the city skyline. My heels were off again, my blouse unbuttoned just slightly more than necessary, my mind spinning in its quiet, endless loop of what am I doing? What am I becoming? You left this on your desk, Isaac said behind me, holding out a small flash drive I'd forgotten. I turned to him slowly. His shirt sleeves were rolled, collar open. Rain dotted his shoulders from where he had slipped out to lock up the outer doors. We stood in silence. You've changed, he said finally. I think I've just stopped hiding, I replied. He nodded like he understood something ancient in me. I'm not asking for anything, he said quietly, coming closer. Not a label. Not a promise. I just want you to stop pretending that you're not alive. That word, alive. He stepped close enough that I could see the lines in his eyes. There was no boy left in him. He was all edge and softness, strength and restraint. The kind of presence that asked nothing but made you want to give. I closed the distance. I don't remember the moment the kiss began. Only the way it unraveled me. There, in that quiet office with the storm outside, I gave in, not to a fantasy, but to the most real part of me. The one that had been waiting, watching, hoping to be seen.
And he saw me.
Afterward, we said nothing. We didn't need to. We just stood for a long time, forehead to forehead, letting the moment settle around us like a new layer of skin.